Back to the Future is a film that is directed by Robert Zemeckis. It stars Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, and Crispin Glover. Back to the Future is the story of a teenager named Marty McFly who discovers that his friend and scientist Emmett Brown has made a time machine out of a DeLorean. A few things go wrong with Marty and Doc Brown, and Marty finds himself in the year 1955. Once he's in that year, he has to figure out how to get more plutonium or more energy into the DeLorean because it's out of energy. And in the meantime, while he's looking to get more energy into the DeLorean, he messes up the way that his parents met and how they fell in love. And so it's up to him to make his parents fall in love so that when he returns to his present time in 1985, he will still exist along with the rest of his family. Getting right into how I feel about this movie, I absolutely love it. It's a fantastic movie. I mean, I even have the poster on my wall right there. You can kind of see partially. I absolutely love this movie. I've seen this movie quite a few times now, and as I was rewatching it, I watched it today. As I was rewatching it, I started to get very analytical with it. I feel like when I watch movies, my brain gets very analytical, and I try to analyze the filmmaking, I try to analyze the story, I try to ask myself questions of why would the director do this certain thing, why would the writers do this certain thing, why would the actors do, you fill in the blank. As I was rewatching this though, I came to the conclusion that this is a movie where if you have an analytical brain like me when you watch films, this is one that you kind of just have to turn that analytical brain off and get swept away by, like, in the story and in the just fun 80s vibe that it gives off. There was one thing that, like, just really threw me off guard at the very beginning of the movie, and after I watched it, I had to remind myself to not be analytical with this movie and just enjoy it for what it is. And I did that after I watched this scene. But I remembered watching the terrorists come and they kill Doc Brown with bullets. The guy pulls up and he kills him with bullets. And then Marty runs around the van and all of a sudden this guy's gun is just jammed. And I'm not saying that that can't happen, but I mean, he just fired bullets. And then it gets even wilder because then the van, I guess it just, like, did he pull up and just turn off the van because the van won't start? Or did the van just die? And I just thought to myself, wow, that is so inconvenient. Or so, not inconvenient, but convenient for Marty. Like I said, after that, I reminded myself, this is a movie about time travel. Time travel doesn't exist. So I just had to remind myself, dude, don't be so analytical with this movie. I mean, come on, it's a fun 80s movie that mixes, like, science fiction and romance together and adventure. It's a lot of things. It's an 80s movie, and just enjoy it for what it is. So after I pushed my analytical brain to the side and I really started having fun with this movie like I've always had. I've never, like, been bored by this movie or anything, but I just really tried to analyze it this time, and that doesn't work. So once I pushed that to the side and I started to really get into things, I found a really big strong suit that I think Back to the Future has, and that's its characters. There isn't a single character in this movie that I don't hate. I love Marty, I love Doc, I probably love Doc mostly out of all the characters. Doc is this awesome dude who's played by Christopher Lloyd. Such a great performance by him. I can't imagine anyone other than Christopher Lloyd playing Doc Brown. He just gives him these weird, quirky, wide-old eyes, and he talks fast, and you just love to see this guy work, and you love to see this character, spiel off on his science-y tangents and stuff like that. I'm a really big fan of how the writers in this movie and how Robert Zemeckis portrayed Marty's family. Marty's family is clearly just not happy with where they are in life. In every single one of his family members, you can just see it in their eyes. They clearly want their lives to be better, but they're just stuck in this rut of being sad and depressed all the time about where they are, and they're not doing anything to change that. And Marty is the one who changes it. Marty goes back to 1955, and because of what he did, we see that at the end of the movie, everyone is completely changed. His brother Dave is no longer this guy who just works at Burger King from time to time and lives at his parents' house. He wears a suit to the office every day. His sister now has confidence in herself. She was talking about at the beginning of the movie how she couldn't get a boyfriend, and now we hear that she has multiple boyfriends. Then we see Lorraine and George, and Lorraine and George are clearly happily married now. George is even like this successful science fiction author. We even see Biff. Biff is no longer taking advantage of the McFly family, and George McFly in particular. He's putting on coats of wax on the family car. And it's just, I love how they wrote these characters to change. And I think maybe this is just me again being a little too analytical with the story and everything and the characters in this movie, but I feel like the message they were going for in this movie is it depends on what you do in your future or in your life that can change your future of what you do. It's really important to make certain decisions because those certain decisions, whether they seem small or whether they seem big, can change the way your future is going to be. Another strong suit that really holds up in this movie is the comedy. There are comedic moments that really land very well and still hold up, like I said. I rewatched this and I found myself giggling and laughing at some of the things. One of my favorite jokes in this is kind of a running gag, I guess you could say. It's like just they kind of just briefly mention it, but it's the thing with the life preserver. They're talking about Marty's vest that he wears, and I think the first time that they say it is when Marty walks into the diner, and the guy that is running the diner says, "What's with the life preserver? Like, did you just jump ship?" And I always find myself just kind of giggling at that when I hear it. The use of Huey Lewis in the news in this movie is excellent. Whenever I hear The Power of Love or Back in Time that they use at the very end of the film, I always think of Back to the Future. I love how they also brought the Huey Lewis in to say, "I'm afraid you're just too darn loud." That's another one of my favorite quotes from this movie. I just like the fact that they actually brought in Huey Lewis to say that when Marty is performing his song. While we're talking about music, in case you haven't figured it out, am a huge sucker for a good film score, and Alan Silvestri knocks it out of the park with this, in my opinion. I regularly walk around the house humming the Back to the Future theme. When you can really drive in a theme from a movie in my head, I love that. One of my favorite sequences in this movie, and I don't really know why it's one of my favorite sequences in this movie, but it is. Every time I see Marty walking around the square in Hill Valley and Mr. Sandman comes on and plays, I just love watching that sequence unfold. And maybe that's because I've been there before. I've been to Universal Studios Hollywood, and if you do the Universal Studios Hollywood tour, you can actually go on the tram tour and go into the square of Hill Valley, like where they actually filmed that. And when I did that, that was one of like the geekiest film nerd moments I've ever had in my entire life, because I was just like taking pictures and I was trying to like just really take it in. But I don't know, maybe that's why it's one of my favorite sequences in this movie. But I just love that every time I listen to the Mr. Sandman play and I see Marty walking around all confused, I just love it. I've already talked about the end a little bit, but I kind of mainly talked about that with the characters. I like the way that it leaves kind of on a cliffhanger going into Back to the Future Part 2, which is an excellent movie as well. Not as good as the first one, but I would definitely say watch Back to the Future 2 if you really liked this movie. I think you would really like Back to the Future 2 as well. But they kind of leave that as a cliffhanger going into there, and then we get one of my favorite quotes from a movie of all time, and definitely one of the best quotes in this movie, where Marty looks at Doc and he says, "Hey Doc, you're gonna have to back up. We don't have enough road to get to 88." And Doc says, "Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads." And he flips his shade, and then the car takes off and cue Huey Lewis in the news. But that's just one of the best sequences in this movie. Like I said, it's not my favorite. I like the one in Hill Valley better, but it's a fantastic sequence. It's a fantastic quote. Like I said, this movie just has a really fun feel, And this is definitely not one of the more analytical reviews that I've done, but like I said, this movie isn't really meant to be analyzed super in depth. So with that, I'm going to give Back to the Future 5 out of 5 stars. I feel like this is a movie that's really, really impossible to hate. I dare you, find one thing that you really, really hate about this movie. Let me know in the comments if you find one, because I can't find anything. That's going to do it for this review. Thank you again so much for watching. If you haven't already, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon to get notifications when new videos are posted, which will be weekly. And like I said, that's going to do it for this review. The review is now concluded.